All right, now I want to talk about emphasis, and I am going to open up a new file uh, and going to print, going to letter, create, and I'm going to open up. I've already put three things in my emphasis. If I can find my emphasis folder, somewhere in here I have one. Let me see. So here's my emphasis folder. And I'm going to put all three of these pictures in to practice with. Okay. So there's going to actually be a little bit of motion in here, but really what I'm going to be doing is really highlighting one part of a picture. Okay. So let's start with this girl. Okay. So I'm gonna get a little closer with it. Maybe not that close. And I'm going to start with selecting a subject. So let me come up here, select subject. So I had another tool in, so I just checked my movement tool. And I'm going to kind of do what I normally do, which I do. I'm going to add some layers, Control J, Control J. This is going to be uh, my blur layer. And this one is going to be my subject layer. Okay. So I'm in my subject layer. I'm going to select the subject. Takes a bit. And then I'm going to do select inverse. And I want to get rid of my background. So I'm going to do cut. And then look up here. You can see in this layer, there's just the subject, whereas the other ones have other things. Okay, so now I'm going to go down to my blur layer. I'm going to try a couple things here. So here's my blur layer. I'm going to go up here to my filter, and I'm going to go to blur, and I'm going to go to radial blur. Okay. So remember, I'm on this second thing. So the subject is still going to be on the top. So I'm going to do the radial blur. So there's a couple things I could do. I could do the spin. So let me show you what the spin looks like. I'm going to say how much amount I need so I can kind of see what this looks like. There isn't a preview here, so I'm just going to look at this. So I want you to see what this looks like. Okay, that looks wild. So I could do that if I wanted. So I'm going to do Control Z. Because remember, I'm on that bottom layer. So the non-blurred person is always going to be on top. So I'm going to go here on the blur layer. And now I think I'm going to go back to my radial blur. And this time I'm going to make the spin quite a bit less. The spin is going to be more like 4. Okay. And I can change where the spin starts, but here I'm just going to keep it in the middle of the picture. So that's a much more subtle difference, and it makes the emphasis clearly on this person. All right, I'm going to show you something else I could do. So I'm going to Control Z it. I could come up here to my filter and do my blur, go back to radial. And here I'm going to do zoom, where I want to zoom in on one thing. So this is where the zoom is. And you can tell that right now, if that was in the middle of the picture, it would be a little low, wouldn't really be zooming in on her face. So I'm going to move it up a little bit. Okay. I'm going to keep it at 4. And this is what it looks like. Okay. So let me show you what that looks like without her. So if I did that without her, you can see that it kind of, there's a round thing that gets less zoomy, gets less blurry the closer we get to her face. Okay. So that's another thing that I could do. So that's one way to emphasize this person. Okay. Let's go and do some other things. So this is just some random hands here in a kind of looking up at some kids. So again, I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to Control J it, Control J it. I'm going to make this. Actually, you know what? I don't even think I need to do this. So I'm going to get rid of that one. I'm going to delete. I'm just going to do one layer. So here I only have one layer, and this is going to be my blur layer. Okay. And so here, I'm not going to do any cutouts. I just want to show you what this can look like with radial blur. So if I go to blur and I do a radial blur, let's say I want to do that zoom. I want to move that zoom up so it's over the hands. And let's say I want this zoom to be 6. Let's see what that looks like. I'm doing that a little bit. You can see it's even more blurry. Let me go back. Now I think I'm going to try it even more. I'm going to do blur, radial. I'm going to move it up. And then I'm going to make this quite a bit more blurry. And that's what that looks like. Okay. So I could try that. I could kind of adjust it a little bit, but that's kind of what that looks like. Okay. So let's do something that to me is something like the grid project we just did. And a lot of you did this. In fact, you could probably find one of your letters that you did for the grid project. So I was using the W. And the truth is, this is a little bit messy. There's a WAS, the A is just as prominent as the W, right? So I didn't do a great job of emphasizing the W. So I'm going to try it again. I'm going to do Control J. Okay. And then I'm going to do Control J. Okay. So this is going to be my letter. And this is going to be letter. Okay. So here's my letter one. Now this one, I'm not going to do select subject. I'm actually going to draw it because I think that I need to do that. So I'm going to do the quick selection tool. And I'm going to just do my W. Okay. And then I'm going to do inverse. And just so you know, I could also use this thing right here, this button, instead of going up to select inverse. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to cut it. And then that's what that looks like. So you don't really see the W on my layer because it's on top of a white background, but there it is. Okay, so now I'm going to go down to this background. Okay. And I would like this whole thing to be blurred. So my W that's on the top layer really stands out. So I can go down to this blur layer and go down here and filter and blur. And this time I'm going to use something different. I'm going to use the Gaussian blur. So the Gaussian blur makes everything a little blurry and a little abstract. Okay. So this is what I'm going to do. Hold on a second. So I want you to see what this looks like. So I want this to really pop, but I also want to be able to identify that there's other letters here. Okay. So look at how bright this is. So even though the others are white, that white really pops out. So I'm going to do that. And I think that's such a great example of really emphasizing that W. It almost, I don't know, it's almost luminous in there. And I can do some other things like on this one, on this blur level. See what happens if I change the opacity a little bit. Nothing happens. Actually, I need to have the opacity on for it to do that. So anyway, that is something that I just did that emphasizes. So I want you to think of a picture or an object where you really want to emphasize the picture and use perhaps a Gaussian blur or a radial blur or some other kind of blur, so that we still know what's in the background, but we have that object or that letter really pop out. So give that a try and turn that in.